Thanks everybody for joining Cafecito Chats. Today, being September the 10th, topic at hand is remembering 9/11. Some of you might remember it, some of you might not have been born or might not actually remember that date, right? This is a situation that took place back in obviously 9/11 2001, and it was a very tragic event, tragic situation. So a couple of things that we're going to explore here today while we remember 9/11 is what lessons of resilience and solidarity can we still carry forward today? What kinds of technology is emerged or has emerged from the 9/11 event, and how have these technologies impacted our daily lives? How did this event actually shape the way the US and the world approach issues of security? So that's the topic at hand. But first, let's focus on whether you remember or what significance does 9/11 hold for you at the moment. So we'll start with Lourdes. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're doing well. Can you start us off by letting us know what significance does 9/11 hold for you, and if you remember 9/11 yourself?
Hi, Lazaro. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be back. Um, I mean, it was just a very sad day. Everything that unfolded and happened. I think what intrigued me the most, or the sadness of it all, is like how many firefighters and like medical people still got sick, like post 9/11, like lung cancer and all this other stuff from everything from that building, and how the numbers like way higher.
Yeah, that's right. And I think off of that situation, the asbestos from the building and also the chemicals in the actual suits and everything around the environment from that collapse actually created a lot of health hazards, not only for the people that were around the area, but also obviously for the whole firefighter crews that were around there from all over the nation, right? In that whole situation. Uh, just over time, we've found out that all those individuals actually got affected in some way, form, or shape. So it's a very sad situation. Yes. Alex, any recollection from your side about 9/11, and how do you remember 9/11? What took place from you, sir?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's still like fresh in my mind. I mean, I remember preparing to go to work that morning and turning on the TV, and all I see is a building with a big hole on the side. Uh, this was right before the second airplane crashed into the other building. So, I mean, just seeing that image, was shocking. But then live, you see this other plane heading towards the other building, and wow, it's really shocking. And I, a couple of minutes or something later, the buildings start falling down. Wow, I mean, I never thought I would see something like that in my life, but well, you and I had just graduated the university. We were just starting our careers, and it was a great outlook for us. And then this happens, and all you can think of is, wow, what's going to happen now?
It was certainly an eerie feeling that morning, right?
Yep, yep.
It's interesting and surprising to say it's been 24 years, almost 24 years tomorrow, 24 years that
Hmm.
this whole event has taken place, and it just like you said, it's still a lot of us still remember it. If you and I had just recently graduated, had started our jobs, so we were 22, 23. So that kind of gives you an idea of how old we are now. But at the same time, it's been 24 years. So that's an interesting, in almost a quarter of a century to say the least, right? It sounds like a long time ago, but I still remember like it was yesterday, where
Yep.
I was at work and I was literally almost going into a conference room when a lot of people started saying, "Hey, did you hear the radio?" And this is before smartphones were very prevalent. So a lot of the news came across either uh, regular television news broadcasting and or news radios and or newspaper, right? That's what we were focused on. So we turned on the television, and every news broadcaster was literally focused on that. As you said, plumes of smoke were coming out of the towers in one of the towers, and at that time nobody really knew if it was an accident, if an aircraft had just crashed into the building, and all of a sudden, maybe 20, 30 minutes later, for the West Coast, it was at about 6 o'clock, 6:30 in the morning when all this was going on. It was about 9:30 in the morning in the East Coast time. So all of that started developing from what I remember. Let's see if Mr. Mike Cruz. How are you, sir? How are you doing? And obviously, remember 9/11. Any thoughts from your side?
Well, 2001 was a, a memorable year for me. I just retired June 1st,
Hmm.
started my bike ride around the United States, blew out my knee in Minnesota, Duluth, came back, had surgery, and I was lying in my bed with my knee all wrapped up, and I saw this on TV, the airplane hitting the tower. For me, it was surreal.
Hmm.
It was unbelievable. We had seen scenes like this in the movies.
Hmm.
So when I looked at it, I couldn't comprehend what real life what had happened. It was on the East Coast. It was so far away, and I'm just going, it just happened. It was a happening, and so the initial there was no initial shock. It was just maybe disbelief that this was happening, and then all the stories afterwards. Like we're talking about the for a week they just had horrendous scenes of what was happening during the right after the planes crashed into the buildings. People were literally jumping out of the buildings there, and I couldn't believe it when they said those things coming down were people. And so it was an unbelievable event. I guess what affects me most now today about that is that it did happen. Why did it occur? I mean, as engineers, we always say, why did this happen? How did we let this happen? How do we not know that this was coming? And so when you hear the later stories about, they kind of knew about the Arabs that were uh, uh, taking flying lessons here in San Diego. They were
Hmm.
actually learning how to fly airplanes. Da-da-da-da. So the whole aftermath was really, uh, you know, I mean, the conclusion was then we started a war with Iraq because we blamed them. And I'm going, wait a minute, the guys were Saudis. All the guys were Saudis that were flying the airplanes. So we didn't go after the Saudis. We went after Iraq. So there was a whole war that drew out of that event. And you know what? Now that I think about it, isn't it kind of surreal that uh, Israel is kind of doing the same thing? They got attacked, a lot of people got killed, and now they're punishing a whole country like we punished Iraq. We invaded a sovereign nation and we started a war. So that, did we learn? Does the world learn from what happens on catastrophes like this? Evidently not. So, just reflecting real quick, I mean, I said, here we go again to a tragedy that could have been avoided, I am assuming, but we didn't take action. And here we are now. We're in we're an open border country. We're not going to stop a lot of this from happening. It's that we have to assume that with open borders, things may like this occur. But we need to be aware of who our friends and who our enemies are, I guess. And it was such a tragedy for me. It was surreal watching it on TV. The same thing over and over and over again. And I'm laid up in bed with my bandaged knee, and I'm just, and it's just you couldn't comprehend it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, as an individual, 2,000 people died within like an hour. on planes that crashed into the two buildings, the Pentagon, then over in Pennsylvania. The whole thing was just, it was surreal. But as a nation, we built the Tower One back up. New York has rebuilt a monument, I guess, to the people of 9/11 that died that day in New York. So we're back up and going. And 24 years ago, I wonder how many people still remember that. It's, at 24 years, time changes us all.
Yeah.
Time changes us all. So it's good to reflect back on this. What did we learn from it? I don't know if we learned anything.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Lourdes, you have your hand up?
Oh yes. I've been to New York a few times and I've visited the monument that they have for in remembrance. It is still sad. There's like just a lot of sadness. And you read what happened and all the names. I think they wrote about all the names that they lost, like both civilians and also the firefighters and all the people that were there. And it's just, I don't know, you see a lot of people visit and you can just see the sadness too. So,
Thank you, Lourdes. Off of that situation, I remember that obviously, the first couple months is disbelief. The day of is, I recall, an eerie feeling, right? I have never seen the sky so clear, to be honest with you, where there was no aircraft flying over the US. Everything was grounded for at least 2 to 3 days, maybe a week. But it was an eerie feeling. Everybody was really somber, and nobody was really, even though we were working, everybody had all this heavy weight on their mind of why, how, and what is coming next, right? That was my personal feeling at that point in time. I recall that once again that every aircraft was grounded, and the sky was really clear. The birds were chirping, and it was interesting to not see an aircraft flying over the skies. But off of that, what type of lessons of resilience and solidarity can we carry forward based on that? A couple months later, when this whole situation started developing and this whole investigation started taking shape, and the whole nation started bundling together, coming together, lending a helping hand, I felt that the nation, believe it or not, started coming together a little more. And that was a good year, more or less, even though politically we were in turmoil. Who do we attack? Who do we seek vengeance from? The flag of the U.S. was flying high in the local communities, right? Everybody was helping their neighbor and everybody else because, as Mr. Mike alluded to, life is precious, and those of us who were alive and were watching the television or read the newscast, we did see a lot of people jump out of those buildings, and we did see that, fire was consuming life, and some people were not able to handle it at that point in time. And then you start hearing the stories of desperation that took place in that situation, right? So, from my perspective, resilience and solidarity were high for maybe the better part of a year and a half, until we actually went into war, and then the whole patriotic scene started taking shape. In 24 years, almost 25 next year, it's gonna be a quarter of a century, and it's a long time, as Mr. Mike Cruz alluded to, and things change, people change, perception change, and I'm interested to hear from the younger individuals here, which is Lourdes, Eric, and Diego. I'm pretty sure that you have heard this time in history, in this scene in history, but I want to get your perspective as the younger crowd here. What lessons of resilience and solidarity do you feel, or do you not feel any? Let's go to Diego. Diego Martinez.
Um, yeah, I mean, sorry, this is gonna be really bad, but can you define resilience for me, please?
Yeah, so resilience is moving forward, continuing to strive to get out of the struggles that you're in, and regardless of the hardship and situation you're in, you continue moving forward. So that's the resilience aspect.
Okay, got it. Okay. Yeah, I mean, in terms of what I've heard, I think just continuing to, just remember all the heroes, all the heroic stories of those people. Like for example, I don't know if you guys have watched. I know in elementary school for sure, and I think a couple times in middle school, they, on the day of 9/11, they showed this ESPN documentary with Wells Crowther, I believe. He was a athlete, but also a firefighter who passed away, saving people. So I think, that's a great example of resilience. If anyone hasn't seen it, I'll drop the YouTube video in the chat right now. It's this short 13 minutes. It's a really great and heartfelt story about heroes in 9/11. But then also, yeah, just continuing to move forward and yeah, so just hearing inspiring stories about the with that document and all that, just that's kind of what I've heard and what I've experienced. And I don't know if anyone else, from younger can speak to that as well.
Thank you, Diego. That's great insight. Eric, I don't know if you can turn on your mic and share with us any lessons of resilience and solidarity that you see the U.S. or the world or nationwide, whatever the case may be, that you observe that we continue to carry forward.
Yeah, so I mean, I was born about 2 years after 9/11 attack happened. So growing up in school, I always remember being taught that it was a moment where the nation came together and you pushed through, and always remember the heroes and although it was a dark day in our nation's history, we still pushed through. Which I mean, we're always like Diego said on the anniversary, like in middle school and elementary school, you always show a documentary. You're always told to never forget, right? And then, kind of as I grew up, got older, high school and then now college, you tend to you tend to be curious about these things, right? Like, why did it happen? How did it happen? Who caused this? What actions took place afterwards? And you learn in your classes in college and in high school history, and political classes. And I just really reflected with what Mike Cruz said about, the U.S. You're kind of like, wait, it was the Saudis who these people were Saudi. Why are we going to a different nation? It's a very interesting topic in my book because growing up, you're always taught to be a patron and be proud of our troops. And then, the more you look into it as you get older, for me, I get kind of sad to think about, some troops enlisted because of this, right? They felt this great feeling of patriotism and to defend the country, right? But then they're set off to a nation or a country that had little to no that had nothing to do with this attack, right? And so you're kind of taken aback, and it just did the U.S. do the right thing? Did they was attacking another nation back the right thing to do instead of focusing on how do we prevent things from happening? How do we come back as a nation and the U.S. together and prevent this from happening and just grow as a society, right?
Mhm.
So that's kind of my look at things, and as well as like if you just think about TSA and airports and just metal detectors going in and out of buildings nowadays.
Mhm.
If you look at any videos about airports before 9/11, I mean, that wasn't that big of a thing. And then it wasn't until 9/11 where TSA checkpoints really ramped up and, national security was a big deal, right? Who are we letting into the country? Who's flying from here? Who's flying from there? And that really did affect everybody in this country, whether you're flying domestically or internationally, right?
That's a good insight, and leads us to the next point in question, right? What kinds of technologies emerged from this situation, 9/11, and how have these impacted our daily lives? And for this, before I get to the young crowd, because you individuals, Diego, Eric, and Lourdes, literally have been born and live with this type of technology since you remember, right? But going back to Eric's point, I remember the time where you could actually go into, at least here in San Diego, all the way to the gate of the aircraft before you didn't have to have a boarding pass. You could literally walk up to that gate and wait with your loved ones as they boarded the aircraft, and you could just say goodbye at that point. And that was interesting because now when you're in the San Diego airport, you can't even go past the TSA. Literally, that huge corridor outside, it's as far as you go, and you can't go inside where the restaurants are and or the shopping area is for the airport, and let alone up to the main gate right before you board the aircraft, right? So that's an interesting situation. So what kinds of technologies emerged from 9/11? So for this one, I'm gonna go to Alex Polo and then we'll go to Mike Cruz. Alex, what do you remember as far as technologies that actually started emerging? We heard Eric indicate the metal detectors being more prevalent, the X-ray machines, anything that you remember that has emerged since then for this situation.
Yeah, and that was a good point you brought up because yeah, I remember one time I dropped off one of my cousins at the San Diego airport, took her all the way to the gate, and said bye. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, being in sales and selling technical products, a lot of my customers, all these new technologies that evolved, I work with a lot of the engineers that develop these technologies. For example, mostly like drones, unmanned vehicles. Those are, from what I know, didn't exist before 9/11. But yeah, technologies in monitoring people, monitoring like whole cities. That I mean, you can call it spy technology, I guess. All that and since I'm talking about this, I mean, if any of you are interested, there is a company here in Orange County called Anduril Industries, and they develop a lot of these systems for government, especially government contracts and stuff. And they're hiring like crazy engineers. They're hiring all types of engineers right now. If you go to their website, it's a growing company. It's one of my customers, and if anyone's interested, just fill out the resume.
Yeah, good point. You mentioned UAVs, right? Unmanned aircraft vehicle and the reconnaissance vehicle. So off of that, little parentheses there. Back in the early 80s, there was a technology with General Atomics that emerged, which was the UAV. And I remember going to, when I was a sixth grader back in 1986, the first and only air show that actually took place in Brown Airfield down here by Otay Mesa. And come to find out, fast forward like 20 some odd years later, there's a book, The Rise of the Predator. And that book talks about the actual instrumental game play that came about and how the Predator for General Atomics, the MQ-9 Reaper, started emerging, and that was the original place where this particular MQ-9 revision or version A was displayed back in '86. However, the market worldwide was not ready for it, right? So it wasn't something that was being demanded. It wasn't something that was being consumed, employed. Even in the 90s, it was proposed to the Pentagon to go ahead and procure this. So you're talking about the F-14, F-18 era where pilot was king, right? As far as the air fighters. And we're coming off of social media where we see Top Gun and all those movies were really, really hot in society, and the whole movement was focusing on the actual aircraft that you saw on the carriers. So, remote piloted aircraft, RPAs, were not really seen as something that was necessary. However, fast forward to 2001, 9/11. The government was like, what the heck happened? We were not prepared for this. We're going into a war. So I remember, fast forward to when I was at General Atomics, you hear the stories of how literally that MQ-9 Reaper came to be, and the Pentagon actually adopted that technology in a haste, right? Because they really needed technology to provide them intelligence. And then now I work at Northrop Grumman, and this is common public knowledge, right? That Global Hawk, it's also an unmanned aircraft, and this type of technology does reconnaissance. And if you look and if you Google it, you'll find MQ-9 is an armed type of aircraft. That's a reconnaissance, also type of drone. But the RQ is simply reconnaissance. It's not weaponized. So you can definitely find those. And there's those are the meanings of the RQ-4 and the MQ-9 if you look them up. But that's literally how this type of technology started being more prevalent. And then this is where we're at. So this talking about technology and the inception, this is more or less where we're at this point. And we're talking 25 years where the unmanned aircraft has been king as far as worldwide intelligence and retaliation, remote operated missile attacks and whatnot. This is what has developed and come off of it. As far as other technology, we have seen the TSA become more prevalent. You taking off your shoes was a big thing that came off, right? That's just one example. But just recently, a couple months ago, 24 years later, this whole taking off your shoes for the TSA going into the airport has been drawn back, right? But it took 24 years for this to actually be retracted. So it's a difficult situation, to be honest. And I want to go over to Mr. Mike Cruz, as I said earlier. What type of technologies have you seen emerge off of this situation, sir?
The first one that really comes to my mind I just flew last month to Colorado, facial recognition.
Mm,
That is a big one. With
mhm,
facial recognition now, you almost don't even know to show your passport or your card anymore because all that information is going to be stored, and TSA is going to have that available to you.
right.
So for me, when I used to fly prior to 9/11, you had seat assignments. You could take on luggage. There's no cost for luggage.
Mhm, right.
You could carry on your luggage. There was no issue with luggage. Uh, and the other big thing is liquids.
Yeah,
We couldn't do. I mean, before you could carry whatever you wanted in your handbag or ship it, other than guns and stuff like that.
right.
But liquids were a big thing. So the technology to set and the X-ray machines and all that now had to detect liquids as well as solid materials. So I'm sure that, and then you have the X-ray machine where you have to stand up and you go around. Because I have a replacement hip and knee, I have to go through that extra
Mm,
X-ray machine now to make sure that there's no other metal on my body. So X-ray technology certainly has increased, but I think facial recognition has been the big one because
mhm,
that's going to alleviate a lot of other uh, uh, sorts of identification. But the thing is, now you have to think about this. Now you're going to be registered with the government.
yeah,
The government is going to have all your information that they need to make sure you're a sound, a reliable citizen.
yeah.
So for me, flying facial recognition, TSA is we didn't have a big TSA.
Mhm,
We just had people at security. Now you got this whole infrastructure of checking da 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 da. And then the other thing, the technology that has transpired is your Apple phone with your QR code with your information on it now. So wherever you go on the airplane or you're traveling or whatever, you pop in the QR code and they got all your information also. So I think that technology has brought us a lot forward, and that might have come out of 9/11 because at that point I think we as a nation were no longer safe. I think that, I mean, if you thought about it, me back then, this is, well, we have open borders. People can come and in nefarious ways harm our nation, you know. And so we had to take a response to that. And so part of the resilience thing that you were talking about, I think this nation has come back and said, okay, we got hit, we got hurt, and now we're going to protect ourselves. And I think we've done it well. Other than I have to say the Iraq War was not, I think, the best move that the nation could have made at that point, but that's what we did. And but other than that, I think we have responded to that. And Lourdes, I too have been at the New York City, and it is. I think once you get there, for me, years later, I felt the impact, and it took that long because being on the West Coast and on the East, that's a long ways. And to see that on the TV, it was surreal. It was like an action film, and it just. But when I got there, and you look around at what was left and what they were rebuilding, I think you've got a sense of being an American, and that we don't want this to happen again.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. So that was from our perspective, we saw technology that emerged off of this. So we remember, at least myself, Alex, and Mr. Mike Cruz, we remember the before and we can see the after effects of this situation. But I want to focus on the younger individuals, Lourdes, Eric, and Diego. Lourdes, what technologies do you see now that have literally emerged off of this that you grew up with, and how has that affected and impacted our daily lives from your perspective, Lourdes?
I mean, when you and Alex describe the world where you can go say goodbye to your loved one at like the gate, that's crazy. Cause I've never saw that. Like I grew up in the new world with the new norms and new
Right.
regulations and stuff. Um, I think there is a little bit of concern for privacy of all the technology and all the invasion of privacy. I'm always like a bit like, is it secure? You know what I'm trying to say? Like, because so many leaks, so many hacking, everything. Yes, we say it's secure, but we don't really know until somebody tests it out. And sometimes, a hacker can be really well versed and they can find stuff. And then you're all like, I don't know, it's a double edged sword between privacy, your information being out there, and all this other stuff. That's my main concern with, yes, we've made a lot of technological advances, but there is a security concern along with all those, and like a safety concern.
Thank you, Lourdes. Great insight, great perspective. Eric, from your point of view, what technologies have we lived with, in your case, that have impacted your daily life?
I mean, with me, again, I grew up with all this technology. I grew up after this. So the one thing with me I remember is definitely when I would fly to Mexico with my family as a kid, the amount of time we would have to wait just to get our bags checked, to get our passports in order, everything just to get to the front gate. I remember being a kid and just being absolutely annoyed by this because I mean I'm 5, 6, 7 years old and my parents are like trying to calm me down and I just don't want to wait in line for 2, 3 hours. So that was one of the big technologies was just TSA checkpoints, metal detectors that I remember. And definitely, I mean, as I got older, seeing a lot of advances in the military. Definitely, the war that the U.S. went into in the Middle East caused a lot of military, a lot of development in military technology with drones, with fighter aircraft, with stealth aircraft, with just being able to, I guess, have the upper hand as the U.S. military would say against other nations, um, which I mean, I guess is a double-edged sword because the U.S. gets advancements, but then every other nation in the world as well wants to advance as much as the most advanced country is, right? So yeah, it's one of those really big things that like I just remember growing up with military investments, TSA checkpoints, facial recognition, like Mike was saying. I flew to Colorado earlier this year, and I hadn't flown domestically in a while. And just I remember going up to the TSA checkpoint, and I was gonna present my real ID, and I didn't even need to. They scanned my face, and they're like, "All right, you're good to go." Which that was a little eerie because it's like, whoa, they already know who I am from the moment before I even step into the airport. But the moment I get dropped off by the Uber, there's already cameras on me, already, surveillance, which that was a big one too, like all over the nation.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and nowadays, even your passport has a RFI chip, right? That you can be literally tracked where you're actually going and by the movement, let alone just your cell phone. It's literally a tracking device, if you think about it, right? Because of the GPS technology that already exists, and I think maybe the government to utilizing it to track movement of individuals if they really wanted to. Going over to Diego, technologies that you have seen that have impacted our daily lives, Diego.
Yeah, I mean, America up to that point had never been attacked before. The last time it was attacked was Pearl Harbor, so it makes sense that, the US wanted to, kind of like what Eric said, wanted to stay ahead, with all this unmanned technology. And I mean, looking at it now, like the F-35, like the amount of technology in that airplane, I'm convinced of my credit score, honestly. Like just, always America wanting to stay ahead. And then, and then when Eric, and also alluding to Eric, when he said the real idea, like, them implementing that, technology, and saying like, oh, like driver license doesn't count anymore. But then also, when I was buying my car, they had me, I think it's called like ID me or something like that. Just another identification account, making sure that it was really you. And I was like, I was talking to salesman, like, what is that? I don't know if ID me is the actual website. It might be called something else. I don't remember off the top of my head. Someone else can remind me. But anyways, so yeah, just overall, just I've learned to live with all this technology, and and it, like, I run into it, and but I'm sure it hasn't affected myself personally compared to like my parents who grew up without that technology. So yeah.
Yeah, good insight, good perspective. Yeah, that's certainly affecting common day lives, right? You mentioned buying a car and now having this additional identity check and whatnot taking place. That's something that in the past it was more paperwork, but now it's online, and I think it's a little faster. The real ID, it's another one, right, where they actually driver's license wise, they ask for your passport and then verification that you are indeed a U.S. citizen. So that comes into place and is very prevalent now, very, very top of mind, because the whole political scene at the present moment is very chaotic on who and what individuals can actually continue to retain some of those documents and continue to carry forward. And there's, fast forward 24 years, going back to the first topic, the resiliency and the actual solidarity, I think has slowly eroded and dissolved. There's a division that's very tangible nowadays. And, I don't want to get into the political conversation here, but you can definitely sense that now. And just recently, the Supreme Court majority decided to go ahead and grant the authority to the president to be able to deploy the National Guard based on race and ethnicity in that case. But that's creating more division instead of solidarity from my perspective, right? And that, I think, during 9/11, nobody really cared as long as you were there to help and to lend a helping hand and to be together. Honestly, that was one nation literally pulling together and continuing to move forward. And then we saw it 4 years later. And just recently, a couple of weeks ago, Katrina 20-year anniversary took place. And maybe all of you here don't remember. For the younger crowd, you probably don't remember the impact that Katrina also had in our nation, right? And this all came within one presidential term, and the same individual that actually took us into the Iraq War was also leading the FEMA or lack thereof support for Katrina. So if you read in the history books, or if you were alive and you saw the live feed and live broadcast and reflecting back on it, that situation was horrendous as well. So yes, Mr. Mike Cruz, you have your hand up.
Yeah, you bring the thought of the notion of change.
Yeah.
We are a nation of change.
Yeah.
I've been around long enough during the Eisenhower era, the Nixon era, the Carter. So the pendulum will swing for our nation to the left and to the right. The only thing that brings us together as a nation is a major catastrophe that affects all of us in a way. 9/11, Katrina, those are actually local things that affected a lot of people, but not the whole nation. But we did come together for a while, and we were concerned about the outcome of those things. But we are a change of nation, and the young people here today, you're seeing that change today. We won't get into the political arena, but you're seeing a change in our attitude as a nation, and how the foreign countries are looking at us as a nation. So we're changing, we're evolving, and so it'll be interesting in the next 25 or 30 years what this nation will be like. But 9/11 was a major catastrophe that brought us all together, and actually the world together, because the world did mourn with us at that time.
Yeah.
But take us 24 years away from that, they're not mourning with us anymore. They're looking at us with, who are these people? What is the United States of America?
Right.
What are their plans for the future? How are they going to affect me?
Right.
How is the almighty dollar going to stand up to the Bitcoin and whatever? So we are a nation of change. I'm kind of like a globalist, or I look at the world as a big view. This change that we're going through even today is a blip in the radar. It's just part of history. But let's go back to 9/11. To me, I watched that on TV and I could not believe what I was seeing. How could this happen in the United States of America, in one of the largest cities that we have, New York City, and watch these two towers come down? That was unbelievable. And I think most people were in shock and disbelief. But you have to remember the people out there in Iowa and Kansas. I mean, they can see this and they can feel for us, but we're all distance from that. It didn't affect us directly. So that's the hard part about it, is how do you bring compassion to something that you're not part of and you're thousands of miles away. So I find that as one of the difficult things in life, to be emotional and compassionate about disasters, even around the world. But as a nation, we give and take, and we're a nation of change. We're going to move to the left, move to the right, go to the middle. The pendulum will swing in a lot of technologies that we have, and their use. I mean, look at the drones. The drones were first a plaything. Everybody wanted to have a drone and go up in the air and look at things and take pictures and whatever. But like you say, the Reaper and the Global Hawk,
RQ4.
they're different missions,
Yeah.
but it's all the same technology.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hang in there,
I
guys.
want to stay with you for a little bit here. The next question that we're going to explore is how did this whole event actually shape the way that the U.S. and the world approaches the issues of security, right? And you touched on it lightly, and you said that over the last 24 years we've started changing, and the world actually saw the U.S. In mourning, and they mourned with us when this whole 9/11 situation took place. But how did this event started shaping the way that the U.S. and the world approach the issues of national and global security from your perspective, sir?
Well, I think the whole attitude changes. If you look at the government as a whole, we had an enemy to fight. We thought we had the enemy to fight, and we went out and did it as a government. So, as individuals, we have little impact on what our government does. We vote, we're involved, but the government is the one that's taking actions, and whatever the notion of our government is at that time, and the actions that they take may not be consistent with our beliefs and our understanding. So, in the response to 9/11, I think for a moment in time, we reacted to what we thought we could do, and that was war, and that was airplane security. That was all big. The remnants of that, the only thing that I see the remnants of that is basically air travel. That's been the biggest impact. The rest of the things that we're doing today, you can't even mention 9/11 having an impact. I don't think. It's been 24 years, and other than the technologies that we talked about, these young people, it was part of their history, and they got whatever. Again, whoever wins gets to write the history. So they got a history of 9/11 and the aftermath of what we did. I don't know. It's just hard to say that 9/11 did have an impact us for a while. Today, I think it's almost come a mute point, other than if you go to New York City and stand in the World Trade Center. It's a mute point. It's just part of history now. We've gotten over it. We fought a war over it. We went to Afghanistan. Now we got what we have today as policy. It's there. It's just part of history to me.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Alex, from your perspective, sir, how did this event shape the U.S. and the world's approach to different issues of national and global security?
Yeah, so just following up on what Mike was saying, I mean, yeah, he pretty much touched on all the stuff I was thinking about, how the world views us today. And again, yeah, they did mourn with us back then, but now it's like, yeah, who is this country now? Who do you think they are? But I think in reality, the yeah, it is a historic event, like Mike said, but I think it shaped the way the world was going to look like for the next 100 years. So I think the impact, we will continue to see it on a global scale. And yeah, the new technologies that emerged that we talked about. I hope not, but we all saw that movie Terminator, and we thought it was just science fiction. But now you look at it, and you're like, oh damn!
We're very close to it.
Autonomous military vehicles. Yeah. So again, being in this industry that we are, like I said, for me, I deal with these companies that deal with national security, that develop technologies for them, and yeah, of course, you have to sign all the NDAs, so you can't say anything about it. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff coming in the future. I mean, it's a double-edged sword because yeah, those technologies also, are used for the good of the human race. I mean, nowadays you have like surgical robots and all that, and yeah, all that stuff. I think is technologies that have evolved from that event.
Thank you, Alex. Great insight. Mr. Mike Cruz, you have your hand up.
Yeah, real quick comment about national security. Prior to 9/11, I had some security briefings on our national security and from the Navy's point of view. And I felt very secure about our national security prior to 9/11 because of the technology we have. And I'm sure it's even better now. And it's really based upon our nuclear capability.
Mm.
If everybody takes a large view, is our country safe? I would say yes, 99% safe from a global attack. And that's what we're talking about now. A minor attack, it's going to affect us like 9/11. We're going to have losses, but it's going to be local. But as national security goes, if we've maintained systems for the past 24 years, I feel relatively safe that this nation is secure. It is safe. And do we have capability to thwart and retaliate? I think, Alex, you're shaking your head. Yes, we do, because that technology is out there. Lazo, you've probably seen something with the drone technology. But I'm sure we've got technologies that are making us safe that we don't know about, and we probably never will unless we're part of it. Yes, we're a safe nation.
Thank you, sir. Now, moving over to the younger individuals here in the call, from your perspective, what way or perspective do you see the world looking at the U.S. is at the moment? Let's talk to Eric Figueroa.
Personally, I feel like, I mean, to kind of touch what Mike was saying about how, yeah, never forget 9/11 as 2001, but it is a thing of like moving on, and we can't necessarily stay in the past. So I feel like a lot of nations across the globe, when it did happen, they did have solidarity with us and towards us, and just did feel, our pain and support. But nowadays, it's more of kind of trying to look at the U.S. and say, hey, the U.S. has such a big influence in the world, such a big powerhouse when it comes to just military in general and technology, that with everything going around in the world right now, with between Israel and the Palestine and the Ukraine and Russia, I feel like a lot of nations in the world are kind of have been looking at us like, hey, like, is the U.S. going to get involved in any of this? Because they have ties to both of these wars in a way, as many nations do, right? When it comes to just trading and just having alliances. So it's like, what's going to happen in the future is kind of what I feel like a lot of nations are looking at us as, saying, hey, U.S., please do the right thing. Especially with, not to get too political, but the current administration. It's kind of, sometimes you look at it and it's like you have no idea what's happening, because it's a little bit of a just roll of the dice of what you're gonna see when you turn on the TV, right? So I feel like a lot of nations are kind of looking at us as historically big influence in the world, and now it's such a key moment in history that what the U.S. does could impact the entire world, right?
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Eric. Great insight, great perspective. Diego, from your perspective, what's the perspective that you see the world has on the U.S. after all this events and 24 years have passed since 9/11?
My perspective, I share with what Eric said pretty much. The world's, just, we're not, the US is currently, not setting the example of what, a perfect nation should be, because of, what you see on the news, because of, the decisions that are being made by our elected officials. So it's not, just not setting the example at the end of the day.
Thank you, Diego. That's great perspective. So I wanted to bring this topic to the table in remembrance of 9/11. Obviously, it took place 24 years ago tomorrow. So it's definitely something that we, as the statement indicates, never forget, right? Obviously, remembering and honoring those individuals in that situation that took place and being solemn about it, right? As Mr. Mike Cruz, Alex, and everybody here alluded to, the world continues moving and continues turning. And we've evolved and we've shaped, and those events actually shaped the whole US, the whole nation, and also touched the world, right? For good or bad, we're in a situation where things have technology evolved, developed, being utilized for information purposes and also counterattacks. If you really want to talk about it, it's really affecting our lives to some degree, to some extent. Here, the younger generation wouldn't really understand what it is to walk up to the gate of an airport before this actually took place. So things have morphed, and we're at a place where the world has kind of lost a little bit of the trust to some extent in what the US is really doing, and they've been shaped and morphed into something a little bit different. Mr. Mike Cruz, you have your hand up, sir?
Yeah, real quick. Just think about this. 9/11, Iraq War. Then we got Saddam Hussein out. And then we got Osama bin Laden out.
Mhm.
What changed after that?
Mhm.
That's something that we did as part of history now. Osama bin Laden was supposed to be the mastermind of 9/11. We got him. We moved on from that point. But we did have, as a nation, we had to have somebody held accountable for 9/11.
Mhm.
Hopefully that person was accountable and the United States did what it needed to do with that.
Yeah.
Again, that will be part of history. Some of you might have experienced that, but that was the consequence, if you think about it, of 9/11. Osama bin Laden, when we got him, that was supposed to be the end of that chapter of history.
Yeah, and that was a 20-year war, and it literally, we got out of it in a haste, to be honest, and it never really solved anything from my perspective. Lost a lot of additional lives, and some individuals in the military actually made their whole career off of that, and they retired off of it. And you still hear about the whole situation, and in the history books, politically, you can go back and make a decision and determination of whether it was right or wrong. You could definitely read it and make sure that you have an argument or a discussion at home. You know, it's a different situation. But the reality is 9/11 took place. It's a history. It's in the history books. It affected a lot of individuals at that time. A lot of us here remember that day, and that was the whole purpose of this topic, to bring remembrance and solemnity to the event. So with that,
Yeah,
any additional comments?
one
Yes,
last
sir.
thing.
Yes, sir.
What I learned from after that, I had the opportunity to spend a week at Capitol, the White House and the Capitol building, learn about politics. And I asked, I was in the like the House Service Committee room where they actually have the committee meetings, and we had a staffer talking to us, and I posed the question. So we went into Iraq, we did something, we fought a war, and we left. What will change? You know what his response was?
Mhm.
Nothing.
Nothing.
They will continue being Iraq. They will continue being the Middle East. We're not going to change the world with one war, and these people will remain. So, in other words, get used to it, gang. When we have major incidences and major actions taken, you take a step back, and like Lazarus says, what has changed?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes it won't change.
So once again, thank you for joining Cafecito Chats. We'll see you next week. Hasta luego. Bye bye.